Hi, everybody. Welcome to Your Winning Edge, where we talk with real SMB sales leaders who own the number, carry the number, they make the call, and they have to live with the outcome. Today, I'm really excited to have Brandon Neustadter, CRO of Datature, on the podcast. Brandon and I had a conversation once again that we thought was going to last maybe 15 minutes, just to make sure that he was going to be a good fit for the podcast. Wound up lasting over an hour. He's got some really cool and interesting things to share, especially around the emerging role of AI in the sales process and ecosystem. Brandon, how are you? Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Skip. Excited to be here.
Good. Well, I'm excited to have you because, again, the conversation that we had was really cool. And in fact, one of the things we're going to be talking about, I don't even know the answer to yet. It was brand new. You were going to be trying it out, and we're going to see really what the results are. But if you would, take about a minute and let everybody know what it is that you're doing at Datature and the biggest change that you have begun to initiate at Datature.
Yeah, so Datature provides end-to-end computer vision AI solutions. So at the core, we have a platform that allow companies to develop custom computer vision AI models based off of their own image and video data. And we work with everybody from manufacturers to logistics, agriculture, robotics. It really runs the gambit in terms of types of customers, industries, and use cases we work with. And I am brought on board as the VP of sales, and then moved into the CRO role beginning of this year.
Can you share one specific application of where your solution fits and what it does?
Yeah, absolutely. Since we're going to be talking about the trade show, we can start there. So we were at MODEX, focused on logistics and supply chain companies. I'll say a couple. The use cases were order accuracy, right? So people picking orders, wanting to be able to verify that the correct items went into the box. So typically they'll have pickers, and then they have redundant people checking those orders afterwards. And so they want to use computer vision to do that. So, every use case obviously is unique because everybody has unique products. And so you have to be able
Right.
to build custom models in order to do that. So that was sort of one use case. And we do a lot with robotics, people building different computer vision models to enable robotics to see specific things, right? So oftentimes people know that LiDAR is used for robots to navigate. But LiDAR isn't necessarily the best way to say, okay, this is a tree versus a telephone pole. That's kind of a silly example.
Right.
But
Right.
a lot in like agriculture, we have a customer that precision sprays weeds, for example, and weeds look different all across the country. So they're having to continuously fine tune those models, or manufacturers looking for defects or monitoring assembly processes. So a couple of the use cases that, could go on for hours talking about use cases. But
So is AI a core in the development of the solution that you have, or is it an add-on to what you're already doing?
yes, AI is the core. So we are a computer vision AI company. So that is all we do
Okay.
is vision AI. So the core, basically, the company was founded by two computer vision engineers who were working at Rolls-Royce, and they were building models to look for defects on aerospace engines. And they
Okay.
used
Oh,
some tools and built some models, and then found out that they didn't own those models. And so they wanted to build a platform that allowed companies to build and deploy computer vision AI models that then became their own intellectual property. And what we
okay.
found, though, in doing this is that, a lot of companies, even if they have the know-how, they want a partner to come in and help them sort of manage that. So we also come in and implement this solution. So it's one thing to have an AI model, which kind of leads into our conversation later. It's another thing to kind of operationalize that and make it useful.
So people on former podcasts have heard me say that I put companies in two primary categories. There are technology supported services companies, and then there are services supported technology companies. It sounds like you guys are the latter. You're a services supported technology company, right? Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
So you came in as VP of sales. You're now chief revenue officer. What's happened to your go to market strategy in the last year? What's the biggest changes? How are things going? How big is your team? That kind of thing.
Yes, and we're moving towards fundraising and sort of, in enterprise sales, right? Sales cycles always take longer than you think, and especially I
Mm-hmm.
think in our world of AI, computer vision, a lot of companies we've seen are slow to move. And I've been in computer vision for 6 years, and I've continued to see that. And so kind of we're moving into a fundraising round. So the beginning of this year, we had to change the team. So we used to have we had two BDRs, two other full-time salespeople beside myself, plus three sales engineers. and 2 marketing people, and
Mhm.
now we're down to 2 other salespeople. We still have the 3 sales engineers, and 1 marketing person, but we had to get rid of 1 marketing person and 2 BDRs at the beginning of the year. So really, the transition has been, how can we do more with less or the same with
Wow.
less? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a common refrain. And you'd mentioned that these were not young, inexperienced BDRs. I mean, you were paying a pretty hefty price for these people, and their job
Yeah,
is to basically set up conversations. Yeah.
exactly. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, their job was to set up conversations, and they were, they were doing well. It's a hard, honestly, computer vision's kind of it's a hard industry because there's sort of 2 ways you can go after the developer market or you go after the business people, right? And so the developer market understands it, but there's a lot of competition in that space. And then the business people, they see the value, right? But they don't necessarily know how to drive it forward because it's so technical. And so yeah, so we
Hence
had
why
to
you guys
pivot
provide
really
the
quick.
services. So
Correct. Yeah.
that's part of the
Yeah.
reason that you provide part of the okay. So it is. I mean, it's a very technical. It requires, I'm sure, some very significant technical expertise in order to be able to just even get the conversation going, right? And that's not going to be somebody that you're going to pay $40,000 a year to, and put them on a high, because I would imagine the funnel. There's not a ton. You're not selling widgets. You're not selling software, SaaS software. You're selling total, real solutions that solve pretty significant problems. You still got to fill the funnel.
So we had to figure out what to do
Okay.
differently, right? And so yeah, our CEO actually, he's based in Singapore. He'd come over to the US. He stayed with me for a couple weeks, and he gave me, he's a brilliant engineer, and he gave me basically a boot camp in how to use Claude Code to build agents to replace as much of the BDR work as we could. So we specifically were this kind of happened in January. I kind of took a break knowing we were going in fundraising. So I went on vacation for 3 weeks and came back. And it's, I think since I've come back, it's fundamentally changed how I've done my job as a sales leader as long as
So
I can remember.
had you ever coded before?
I mean, in high school, I did some coding, and in
Yeah. Okay.
college, I took a Java
Yeah.
class, so I
Yeah.
mean,
It's
I
kind of like
can.
me. I took 8 years of French and I can barely speak it today,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm a lot
I
older than
mean,
you. Yeah.
I could look at it and maybe understand some very, very basics, but other than that, absolutely not. Yeah.
But you did it. But you built something in our ongoing maintenance in Claude Code.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm building something every day. I mean, last night after I put my son to sleep, I was building new Claude agents and skills to do new things for me. So I mean, even right now, no, I paused it because I didn't want to, lag out. But typically, I have 3 monitors, and one of my monitors I'm doing my work, and the other 2 I'm monitoring my 2 Claude agents with 2 different accounts doing different things.
So how have you found all of the free help that is being offered on LinkedIn on how to build out playbooks and so on and so forth? What's been your experience?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I every time LinkedIn algorithm must know that I comment on these posts, right? So they're always popping up, and I always do the send the connection, and then they're like, oh, comment this keyword, and we'll send you the playbook,
Right.
right?
Right.
I think
Right.
it's interesting is that most of them are all based off of prompts. So they tell you the workflows, and I think the workflows are, the workflows are right, but all the workflows that they say are pretty much the same, right? And it's kind of the same in sales, right? Of define your ICP, find the companies, find the titles, do some enrichment, which is fine, but that's everybody really knows that, and then I think what they're sort of shortcutting here is they're saying, here's a prompt. Even I got one yesterday, and it was probably more thorough than I've seen. But in my experience, prompting doesn't work in the way you want it to. You set a prompt, and that's a great way to start, but that's not the end game. It's like that's like
Well,
step
one answer
one of
usually leads,
50.
yeah, and one answer to 15 new questions, which, by the way, are not covered in the prompts because you don't really know. By definition, originality doesn't scale. So your situation is going to be different from somebody else's.
Right. And even if you have the best prompt in the world and you create the right agent, it doesn't mean that it even does what it's supposed to. I mean, I can't even tell you leading up to this trade show how many times that all of a sudden, I tell it, follow all your rules, review the skill, make sure you're following the sequences. And then 30 minutes in, I'm like, what are you doing? And it's like, well, I decided to take a shortcut and not follow all the rules. And actually, I skipped this thing. And sorry about that. I'll make sure I do better next time. And and it's funny because sometimes you can't control it. And so you have to monitor it.
Right,
So
right.
even if you got it perfect on the
It thinks
prompt,
it's smarter than you. Yeah, it
yeah,
thinks it's smarter
exactly.
than you. Yeah.
Yeah. So even if you got the prompt perfect, which, I don't think one prompt is enough, it's still going
Right.
to go haywire sometimes.
Well, in fact, now the latest is you don't want to be too specific on the prompt because it limits the creative capability of AI to be able to do what it's supposed to do, and that is, well, I've gotten you this far. Now, what I like about it is that it will say, here are 17 more questions. Would you like me to follow through? And then you're able to pick and choose. Yeah, that one makes more sense, right? So in our
Right.
conversation, you mentioned 500 bugs that you had found, and what? Tell that story.
Yeah. So one of the things, so the base of the background was we're going to this trade show. They give you a list of all the titles attending and the companies, but that's it, right? And then they try to get you to buy their list. And so I was like, okay, well, I don't have the budget. We were just talking about that. I had the budget to do the
Mhm.
trade show, rent a little bit, and then that was about it. And I obviously don't have BDRs anymore, and you know how much time it is to do that. So basically, I rated the list, found out a way to rate companies, rate titles, and it's like, okay, let's look at LinkedIn to try to guess who these people are based off of their title and company, which worked, and we could talk about that. But then it was like, okay, now I need to know who am I going to reach out to on LinkedIn. And so one of those things you want to look at is what's their LinkedIn activity. So I created a whole scoring system on how to score somebody LinkedIn activity, basically meaning are they most likely to accept my connection request and engage with me on LinkedIn. So one of them
So
was obviously, yeah.
hold on. Can you give just a little bit more detail about how you set up the scoring system?
Yeah, I mean, I asked Claude for its advice, but basically we looked at, how many connection requests do they have? Do they have a profile picture? How often have they commented or are commenting on people's posts? And how many posts have they done in the last 90 days? And then basically each one of those things, like if they had a picture, gave it 1 point. If they had X amount of connection requests, different buckets gave them different points. If they did a post,
And
that
it
was
can get
more
all of that
points.
on LinkedIn. I thought
Yeah.
there was too many. I thought there was too many barriers on LinkedIn to get that kind of information. You were able to have Claude run it, the agent run it.
Yes. Yep. Because it can visit each
Okay,
profile. Now, obviously,
right.
LinkedIn will kick you out. So I couldn't do it for all of them. So that's why I first scored companies and the titles, right? And so then I was like,
Okay,
okay,
got it.
let's look at the top 5 titles for these top companies and then go and visit their profiles and analyze all this information and then create a score for those people. So the
Okay,
bug was it was probably running for, I don't know, 2 weeks or so. And then like I
burning
said,
up a
I
lot of
just
tokens.
a lot of tokens, constantly is kind of joke to my CEOs that, work now is in token blocks. It's like, okay. And, I gotta go to bed now every night after 11 because, it resets at 11. So I gotta start the next session with more tokens.
Little inside
Um,
tip. Okay,
yeah. Although now they have the scheduler, so you can kind of play around. But anyway,
okay.
it was running on my other screen, and I saw it visit this profile, and it took the screenshot of some VP of some company, and and I saw it, and it gave him a really low score, and like I just glanced at it right when I was working, and I was like, how's that even possible? They have 500 plus connections, and so I told it to stop and I was like, hey, like what happened with this profile? Why did you score it so low? And it went through all the reasons and it's like, well, it only has 5 connections. I'm like, 5 connections? That's 500 plus connections. What are you talking about? And for
Oh
some
no.
reason, the plus icon next to the 500 threw off Claude and it read that as 5. Who knows why? And so all these contacts that it had been evaluating, anytime it had 500 plus, it had been scoring them as only having 5 connections. So it was actually doing the exact opposite of what it
Oh
should have done.
geez.
And so that's just one of those things of you're like, how did that even happen? And to your point, Skip, how you're talking about, they're supposed to be smart and figure these things out. Obviously, it didn't. And I even run management review. So I even tell it like every couple of days to review what it's done, find errors, make suggestions. It never caught that. It never caught that. The only reason I
Wow.
caught it was because I had it open on another screen and was looking at it.
So what that I mean, at the very least, that costs you time as far as being able to identify and get messages out and to be able to set up meetings, right?
Yeah. I mean, luckily, is when I went back and redid the analysis, it didn't affect it too much because people that have 500 plus connections typically are also the ones posting and commenting. So they still scored higher than somebody who didn't. So there were some key contacts that missed, but luckily it wasn't as bad as I thought it could have been after two
Wow.
weeks of running with that error.
Okay, so you went to MODEX. Tell everybody what MODEX is.
Yeah. So MODEX is the largest logistics and supply chain show I think in the world, definitely in the country. Happens every 2 years in Atlanta. Takes over the convention center. 20,000 attendees.
Wow.
650,000 square feet of booths. Some of these booths are 50 by 50. They bring in full on warehouse automation systems.
Trade show
Massive.
hell.
Yep.
Just
Exactly.
unbelievable. All right. So
Yeah.
you had a goal for the number of people, number of meetings you wanted to have at MODEX. What was that?
I mean, I don't know if we had a goal. The goal was just to do as much as we could, right? So I think
Right.
leading into the show, we had about around 70 people who had responded on LinkedIn saying that they would come by our booth from
And
the
so
sort of.
and they came, so they responded on LinkedIn, and your outreach to them was via agent.
So the connection request was of just like, hey, are
Okay.
you attending MODEX? Would love to connect and hear what you're doing with AI, or something pretty generic. Once they connected, then I would take over. My colleague would
Okay.
take over, and those were natural conversations. I don't think that you should let AI do everything. So
I agree. I agree.
those were natural conversations. But the connection,
Okay.
the scoring, the connection requests were automated.
So they connected,
Hmm.
which is actually not a small thing anymore, right? Especially if anybody's got any level of discernment. I probably accept maybe 20% of the connection requests that I get, because it's just I now know, I've been doing this 40 plus years. I now know that depending upon the type of connection request, the very next thing I'm going to get hit with if I accept is a sales
As a
solicitation,
sales
which
pitch,
just
right? Yeah.
pisses me off.
Yep.
Okay. So you had 70 that had agreed to come by the booth. How many did?
It was about 27, 28 out
Okay.
of the 70 came by.
Right.
So personally, I think it was success. Because I also see is that all those other ones that didn't were our MQLs, right? They're marketing qualified leads that now I have a reason. I knew they went to the show. They just didn't come by the booth for whatever reason. I mean, we even had somebody from, I'll say, a Fortune 500 company, robotics division, who came by our booth 10 minutes before the show closed on the last day saying, I'm so sorry I didn't get to your booth. Like, I'm late to catch my plane. Follow up with me afterwards and we'll set a meeting, right? So I think
So what kind of quality was there in the 20?
it was good. I mean, they were Fortune 1000 massive companies that came by
So
because that's who we
effectively,
targeted.
then, what you had is you had 70 marketing qualified leads, okay, that turned into 27 discovery calls.
Yep.
Yes, I mean they were
Yeah.
substantive
Yeah.
discussions, right? They're not really in SQL until you look at what was discovered to determine how many of them are probably SQLs.
Probably most of them.
Okay,
Um,
so
yeah, I mean,
there's a sales process, a sales rhythm that has been established. There's been next steps that have been agreed to, right? Which
yep.
to me, I mean, look at regardless, I don't really care what a sales process or methodology people use. For me, the most simplest one to evaluate is BANT, right? Budget,
Hmm.
authority, need, and timing, right?
Yep.
So they had a need that you were able to speak to,
Hmm.
and there was some level of timing that was mentioned. When did they maybe need to do something? Yes.
So I think the first three, I think this has been actually the sort of the challenge in computer vision is we talk to people at budget, they have authority, they have need. The timing is always the biggest challenge because they've been operating without it, and it's convincing people that the return on investment is there because it's sort of a nice to have, and you're trying to convince them that they can move people from what they're doing now to something else that's more effective for them, right? So timing is the one that we've always
But
that I will yeah.
wait a minute. If let me so push on that a little bit, because if they came by the booth,
Hmm.
right, then there was clearly a level of interest, right, that
Correct.
had been established relative to what it is that you guys are doing,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Okay. And so they maybe they have, depending upon the size of the company, maybe they have budget, maybe they have, because if they're performing the function already, right, then it's either manual or with people or at some level of automation. But what you're saying is this isn't a displacement situation for you other than status quo. You may be displacing status
Correct.
quo, but you're not displacing a competitor.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I
And
would say
so,
there's timing. I guess it's I look at timing as, it's a fixed, I want something in I look at timing more as when is it going to close? Right. And I think that's where, yes, they're like, yes, we want to do something in the next year. Okay. Sure, you could call that in SQL, I guess, because there is some general timing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nurture, but
Right.
as opposed to
Yeah.
an active. But the key thing here is you now have warm conversations. You now have warm
Right.
leads that they know what you do. You know
Hmm.
what they do, right?
Hmm.
And so you now have a basis, a foundation to continue to communicate.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and
And I think the
so
biggest one
this
is
is
the need because,
yep,
all these
bingo.
people had a specific need, right?
Yep,
Yes, the timing was
yep,
like, okay, where is this going to fall in their priority list? I think that's what I was trying to say is that they don't always know where because they're there, right? They have lots of needs, right? Lots of things they've come to that show to look for, right? And so
right,
they have a need. It's where are we going to be able to position ourselves within
right.
their timeline of all needs?
Well, one of the things that I talk about to that exact point is on the discovery call, my only real discovery question, if it's an inbound, is what makes this call important today? Because that now gives me need. It also gives me timing.
Hmm.
And whether or not I decide to have a second conversation, all I really need is, do I really understand that they have a real need? Do they have a real need? Or is it, and to your point, it may be a nice to have right now, but the function that you solve for has to be performed. So now it's just a matter of, is it a different way to do that? Okay.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
if I took 70 MQLs and I converted that to 27, that's a little bit over a third turned into SQLs, of which, how many of those do you think, it's probably too hard to guess right now, but of the 27, how many might you have immediate sales situations for that might go into your pipeline?
The show ended Thursday. I got back Friday, right? Um,
So let's say
I will
it's
say,
five or six. Let's
yeah,
just be
yeah, yeah,
conservative.
sure.
Say it's 5 or 6. So you had 5 or 6 opportunities that were generated from 70 MQLs, which is about 12%, 13%. That's not bad.
Yeah, that's good. And especially since now
Converting
that
an
we have
MQL to an opportunity.
yeah, now I have a system, right? And so now it's how can I use sort of the system that I built from MODEX now that I don't have a trade show? How do I adapt it and keep it going?
And again, it's not like you've got, 1,000 leads, right? You've got enough that are manageable for you and your sales engineers to be able to manage, and the salespeople that you have. What has been then the playbook now, okay, going forward?
Hmm.
Okay, we've done this. You'll get better at it, right? I mean, AI will get better. Today's the worst day that
Hmm.
AI is ever going to be,
Right.
right? So AI is going to continue to get better at it. What's your going into? You're just starting into Q2. You're in a fundraise situation, right? And so one of the things that I know in talking to PEs, especially or VCs, really, and that is they want to know that you have a real handle on how you're going to optimize AI.
Yeah.
Period. I mean, there's just no,
Yeah.
if it doesn't start with that, then there's really no reason to talk to you because they're not going to be able to exit to a PE firm unless you're able to tell a really good AI story, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your story going into 2026 here, and how you're going to optimize AI?
Yeah. And to your point, I think the other thing that we're hearing from investors is, how are you being most efficient with, the capital that they're going to give? And that is part of the AI story, right? And so, the strategy right now is sort of at a higher level, basically what we did at MODEX, which is let's find so we take a step back. We just launched a product for fine tuning vision language models, which is a fairly new, I'll say it, AI's cutting edge, fine tuning VLMs is sort of bleeding edge. No enterprise Fortune 1000 companies are really doing much with VLMs right now. A lot of it is other AI companies. And so we have to, I have, again, myself, two other salespeople, and a sales engineer. How are we going to launch this new platform, which we put a lot of research and development into? And so that's one of the big
Hmm.
things the VCs are asking. And so we basically I created a bunch of AI agents to go out and I created an AI agent that became expert on vision language models. What are they? How are they useful? What are their use cases? What does research show? I created another one that became an expert on our platform. What are its advantages? How does it compare to competitors? Things like that. Then it's like, okay, with this knowledge now, let's create another agent that's going to go and scrape Crunchbase. Signed up for Crunchbase for a week, and I had an agent go and find basically all of the different startups in AI space that could utilize a VLM. And then I created an agent to score them. I had a create an agent to rank them, create an agent now to find all the key contacts for all those people. And now we're crafting all the messaging based off of, their persona, their company, what our platform can do. And so we're creating basically a whole go-to-market engine of what would typically be, some marketing people, some product people, BDRs, and all of this. I'm just creating agents to kind of help us quantify who are the ICPs that we want to go after and how are we going to do that.
Hmm.
Um, and so the sort of story to the VCs is that we can now use AI and build agents to go and optimize to find who are the companies that can most likely use our services, who are the people in those companies that are most likely to engage with us, and use the AI to help us create more targeted messaging that's going to resonate with them based off of what their company does. So, to your point, Skip, if you hate getting, these generic connection requests, right, then immediately go become a sales pitch is like, how do you engage with a contact in a more natural way, right? So it's like finding their posts to comment on
Right.
and
Right.
liking things that they post. And so it's not just immediately going straight to the pitch. It's like, okay, let's follow these people. Let's see what they're posting about. Let's track what they're doing um, on social media so that we can engage with them in a more natural way that doesn't just become a straight to a sales
And that
pitch.
now takes 1/50th of the time, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
because it's so automated, there's so much of the digging, there's so much of the mining that has to get done, and that has to get done continuously because the world doesn't stay doesn't stay static. It's a
Right.
dynamic segmentation. People leave, people move,
Hmm.
and where they weren't really a prospect at the company A, they're now a prospect at company B because company B is a prospect, right? And so you got
Yeah.
to what it does, I think, is when I was with Growth Acceleration Partners, we made a very clear distinction between customers and clients. Customers are people, clients are companies. And so clients come and go, but you want to make sure that you're staying in touch and that you develop a relationship with the people
Hmm.
because people change companies.
Yeah.
All right. And so you want to make sure that if that's the case, then they're coming to you because they've had such a wonderful experience. So I mean, do you see a time, say just really in the next year? I think it's silly to say, well, in the next 3 years, because God only knows what's going to happen in the next 3 years. But say within 2026, do you see yourself going back to human BDRs?
Well, that's a good question. I think for certain industries and so we tried an outsource group for going after manufacturers because manufacturers, the key people we want to talk to, aren't in front of the computer. So what I think is that I think BDRs are going to go back to sort of old school calling and sort
Hmm.
of what maybe had happened a few years ago where a lot of BDRs were doing, LinkedIn outreach, email outreach. I think that kind of BDR work is not going to be that relevant. I think it's more going to be, you know, automated outreach, BDRs engage once there's been sort of some signal of a response, and BDRs that are going to go back to hitting the phones and trying to get appointments, especially in physical industries, which is what we target.
I think that's a really good point. It's kind of like where if your target is knowledge workers, then you can go with LinkedIn, you can go Reddit, you can go anything on social media. But if your target is basically the difference between digital and analog work,
Hmm.
if the target is really analog work, all right, then that's all about being able to make personal connection and so forth. I had a six step call process, which was a combination of voicemail and email,
Hmm.
and then basically after six, if you're not really getting a connection, just move on,
Yeah.
right? And because
Yeah.
it's depending upon the amount of time and so forth that you do it. But that's interesting that as you on an industry specific. Now, will you hire them or will you outsource them again or TBD
TBD. I mean, if we get the funding we want, I'd probably hire them again because it scales better if you can get the results and paying like a per meeting thing.
per
Um,
meeting? Yep, yep.
yeah, yeah, yeah. One thing I wanted to add is I think that we have to be careful because there's always been LinkedIn, automated LinkedIn outreach tools, right? There's been like I used to use Dripify a few years ago, and like it can send mass connection requests and you can create a workflow, and so that's not new. I think what's new is that it can be hyper personalized, right? And the ability to track, like I was saying, if this new product, like we're going after startups, I want to talk to CTOs and CEOs. And for me to be able to find every single one of their posts, like that would be such a manual process before. Like I'd have
Hmm.
to have a whole BDR teams tracking say 100 companies and going in and saying, oh, did these people post? How can we engage with them? How can we be where they are? And now that is what can be automated, right? And I can now flag posts that maybe I want to comment in or engage in, or I can see what they're commenting on, what they're interested in. Or maybe I can just look at like, are they hiring? Right. And I actually have one
Hmm.
that goes and looks for roles in an X certain set of companies. So every time they're hiring, I get flagged. Right. So I think there's always been sort of these automation, but there hasn't been any personalization. And so I think that's what Cloud Code and building these agents really enables.
So if you're going to hire BDRs, even if you're going to hire, well, I guess to some extent, if you outsource it, then obviously you'll investigate, how effectively or is that company utilizing AI, right? But I think that if you're going to hire BDRs, then you hire really great people. It's kind of like the Chick-fil-A model. You hire really great people, but then you have operations that is so tight and buttoned up that they don't have to worry about what they're going to do and who they're going to talk to. That's all being handled for them. What you want are
Right.
really great people that come across great on the phone
Yep.
and that know how to leverage the technology. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and then know how to engage people once the conversation started. I think that's the difference
Mhm.
is my BDRs that I had before, we were having them try to start the conversations, right? And I think what it's going to switch to, especially for people that we're engaging with digitally, is that it's not about them starting the conversation. It's about them continuing that conversation and building the relationship. And I think that's where the BDRs will play,
So it's
especially for
it's the
us.
ongoing nurturing. So
Correct.
BDRs become with the assets that they're now going to have with regard to that can come from AI. Then BDRs provide a very real role and value in the nurturing process and making sure. So you're in a need state business. I've been in several need state businesses, and the reality is when you're in a need state business, it's all about just positioning. It's all about
Hmm.
staying top of mind,
Yep,
right? So that when
absolutely.
that need, and the need's going to come around, it may not be this year, maybe it's going to be
Hmm.
next year, but again, that function is still going to have to get performed, right?
Yeah.
And so what you need is you need somebody that can as effectively or efficaciously as possible be able to keep you top of mind.
Yeah. And I think
Okay.
utilize those tools, right? Because I mean, ideally, I'm not the one that's looking at our key personas and finding posts to comment on, right? Like we want BDRs that are knowledgeable enough about our industry, our value, and can engage at a high level. So to your point, they're not going to be, you know, people 1 year out of college. I want people that, can really
Right.
articulate themselves and yeah, maybe use some generative AI tools to help write comments or to help, but there still needs to be a person there looking at those and engaging with those people to build those long-term relationships and not just be the transactional, hey, do you want to meet tomorrow? Right? Or do you have 30 minutes next week?
So what's interesting then is what you're saying is it may take a whole new set of skills for managers to be able to bring discernment, to be able to bring oversight, to be able to provide correction, to be able to provide guidance in the application of the tools, and not so much in the application of specific skill sets. But at some point in time, it's still, if they're going to send out an email, if they're going to have a conversation, it's still your brand, right? And
Right.
you can't abdicate that to AI, right? It's still got to be you. How do you do that? How do you maintain, for lack of a better word, control over the brand that's going out to the market?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that what's interesting is that when I'm working on, say, commenting on a post, right, I'll give it some ideas of what I want to comment and it'll sort of refine it. And I have another agent actually like analyze it that's separate because agents tend to like to praise their own work, right? So you can actually
Yeah.
even imagine in a world where you where you have sort of you've trained something like I actually now have a memory file, right? This is like Claude Code, a memory file that is an expert on everything Datature, right? And I
Hmm.
have another one that's sort of an expert in terms of what kind of tone I like to use and like how I like to engage, right? So you can imagine that perhaps you have something that's analyzing what your BDRs are doing, right? I mean, if you had a team of BDRs and you needed to look at, hundreds of comments that they've posted and done, I mean, you could have agents look at all that and sort of give you a summary so that you can then help coach those BDRs. I also think that I've seen a lot in SaaS is that when BDRs are onboarded, it's more about the process and not about the company or the solution, right? It's like, here's our
Hmm.
process that we've come up with. right? And like follow this process. And there's not much creativity. And if you look at, BDRs obviously have high churn rates, and because they're not really historically, I don't think that they've been empowered in the way
Right.
that sales leaders should empower them. And so I think, to me, if I was bringing on BDR, it'd be a lot more about, let's learn about, computer vision and use cases and how we engage in executives and how we, more about the solutions and the companies versus like, here's our 10-step process to follow.
Well, I like to say for many years, the process protects us. And you can take somebody that, again, going back to the Chick-fil-A analogy, that's what they have. They have their processes so buttoned up that you don't want people thinking about the process. You want people thinking about the customer.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so forth. And so I think that's going to provide some additional challenges, because there's going to be very, very little, if in fact, maybe no time between when we need to get this message out and the message actually going out.
Right.
And so the process of protection and making sure that emails don't go out that are off brand or inaccurate or whatever, because you're going to now have a lot more of those at scale, that's going to be an issue.
Yeah. It will be a challenge for sure.
So this has been a great conversation, and I appreciate your willingness to be so transparent about what's working and what the challenges still are. I just heard that the new president or CEO and chairman of Meta, or was it Google? I forget which one. Anyway, said that right now less than 25% of small to medium businesses actually engage with AI. I was really stunned, honestly, by that, because it's the easiest thing in the world in the event that you are so inclined to do that, right?
Yeah.
So if you were to provide some guidance, again, you had your CEO fly in, and in 2 weeks you're Claude coding, right?
Yeah.
What guidance would you provide your peers in the marketplace relative to AI and its adoption?
I think don't be afraid to experiment. It wasn't like I just woke up and, we talked about some of the hiccups that have come up, right? And so, I've sort of thought, to your point, Skips, like I put in a lot of work to get those 70 people to say they were going to come, and, what was it worth it, right? And you always have to look on the ROI on your own time. And if I looked at it in a vacuum, and said, oh, I got these many people to say, these many people showed, and, and how many are SQLs, it was probably still worth it. But if I look at it the whole of how much I learned about using Claude Code and building a system, it was 1000% worth it, because there's no way I would have learned and be at the point I'm at now if I hadn't tried it and just gone for it. Right. And did I send some connection across to people that I shouldn't have and made no sense? Absolutely. Like I looked at some of the people I said and I was like, I don't know how this person slipped through the cracks, right? Like some HR person. I was like, there's no way they're going to be at MODEX. I don't know how it happened. Right. Because there were bugs that I kept finding, but I learned a lot about the process and how to put in control. So I'd say my advice is just do it. You have an idea, try it on a small scale and watch it. I think that's the other thing is I see a lot of these prompts and it's like, just put this in a prompt and just let it go. I wouldn't have caught that 500 plus bug if I didn't have it on another monitor that I just saw in the corner of my eye, like it's skipping over some VP who had all this engagement. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Right. So I think experiment, watch it, don't fully trust it. And you just have to go for it at some point. And you're going to learn it as you go. And I think the other thing is all these people who are saying, just use this prompt and it's all going to be perfect. Like, no, come on. It's not that easy.
No.
If it was that easy.
If it were that good, they wouldn't be giving it away.
Right.
I mean, if that were that perfect, I mean, really, I mean, look, some of these, I mean, I've read some of these, frankly, that have been, in fact, one I just read that was maybe one of the best ones that I've read, and it was real. And I mean, but to your point, there's a whole lot of stuff you still have to fill in, right? Yeah. Which is and that stuff that you have to fill in, you may not know yet. So there's still a pre-step, right? There's still a precursor step that you got to go fill out to say, okay, what's my ICP? Well, I don't know yet. Okay, that's a whole different prompt that you got to do before you can put in the prompt to say, okay, here's my ICP, and I want to create some hook emails with 5 hooks that'll get somebody. Well, okay, you got to make sure it's it's so funny. I've been in this business again for a long time, computers for a long time. Garbage in, garbage out is one of the most still pervasive cliches that's out there, because you're only going to get back from AI as good as you were able to put into it relative to that. Change. So, thank you. Well, actually, let me tell you real quick. So to your point of agents that are going out and looking at your ICP and so on and so forth, you actually fell below my ICP. It did. But when I
Yeah.
looked at, but here's the thing. You agreed to have the conversation, and it says all over my website and it says all over my LinkedIn, nothing happens without a conversation, right? And so, so we had a conversation, and I was I'm looking at my viewers and going, what can they get out of this conversation? And I think my viewers are going to get quite a bit out of this, especially where you are and what you've been doing. So I really do appreciate your time and your candor. And we will check in 6 months and see if you've hired human BDRs back, or if you're
Sounds good. Well, thanks again, Skip, for having me. Really enjoyed the conversation.
you bet.